Hi and welcome to the Beer Temple. I am Chris Quinn coming to you from below the Beer Temple shop here in Chicago, Illinois. And although it is right in the middle of Chicago Craft Beer Week 2015, coming up on Memorial Day weekend, to give you guys an idea of what time this actually makes it on air and how long it takes me to actually get a show up, there you go. Whenever you're watching this, just think back to how long ago Memorial Day was. Notice I put 2015, but because by the time this comes out, it could very likely be approaching 2016. Slight exaggeration, but not that much. Anyway, just doing it down here again. The shop is open, getting ready to open these up in the store, and figured it might be a nice opportunity to kind of taste them out and do a show, because I know these are a couple beers that people have shown a lot of interest in, for good reason. These are two beers from the Sante Adairius Rustic Ales. Sante Adairius Rustic Ales, they go by the acronym SARA, S-A-R-A, from Capitola, California, pretty much due south of San Jose, and really one of the, considered one of the kind of premier wild fermentation and mixed fermentation American breweries making stuff today. Very much the kind of I don't know, the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of the craft beer scene right now, I would say, is really these, rustic ales, farmhouse ales. You've probably been seeing a lot of these on the show lately with, we just had Penrose and DeGard, and we had Jester King and Jolly Pumpkin and Hill Farm and all these guys on, and Prairie a couple times. I don't want you to think that these are more important than any other beer style, but I do think it's kind of cool to, document a little bit of a pretentious way to put it, but just to highlight, what is going on right now in craft beer. And that is, like I said, these mixed fermentation, wild fermentation beers that are being made kind of in the, American style. They're called American wild ales, but unlike something like a Berliner Weiss or a Goza, or these kind of kettle-soured, lactic-forward beers that are essentially clean and can be done quickly, these are more of almost like a Saison base often, and often have much longer fermentation times, barrel fermented, rather than just barrel aged or conditioned sometimes as well. And they take on a lot of these kind of wild, earthy, complex, and sour flavors as a result. And this was really the area of expertise for the Belgians exclusively for a little while. Back in the day, a lot of English brewers were probably doing this as well, and who knows, probably all over the place a little bit. If you go back far enough, that's where all fermentation occurred, in a barrel. But right now, I think a lot of the brewers that are getting a lot of attention have kind of taken influence from, one, the Belgian breweries, who are the Lambic breweries and the Flemish Red breweries, stuff like that, and kind of making it their own thing, and almost kind of the second tier, the second wave of the Jolly Pumpkins and Russian Rivers and Lost Abbeys of the world. They're just kind of taking it, taking their spin on it. So very exciting to have these two beers here. The first is the West Ashley. This is an apricot wild ale from Sante Adairius. I believe that it's aged in French Pinot Noir, French oak Pinot Noir, so probably a California. I mean, they're very, very close to wine country, I would assume. French oak, U.S. Pinot Noir. So it looks like this is a mixed fermentation. Started out as a normal Saison and then soured with house yeast and bugs, and probably whatever indigenous, very likely indigenous fruit that's on the apricot, depending on how they do it, and aged in a wine barrel to kind of funkify. So give this guy a shot. Oops. There we are. All right. The apricot sour has really become a very popular fruit to add to sour beers. I think because oftentimes they do have a little bit of tartness to them. I also think that some of the natural Brettanomyces yeast, to me, tend to throw a really kind of peachy stone fruit apricot flavor, and this just kind of enhances it. It's always nice when you add a fruit that can just very much complement the existing flavors already. You know, having a nice contrast is great too. The traditional fruit to add to these beers is cherries, but I really think that apricot has kind of come along and become a very popular one as well. The most prominent would be the Fufun from Cantillon, which is kind of, I think, held as the gold standard for the apricot sour beer. Anyway, let's get to what's actually here. So really kind of a cloudy beer, this kind of yellowy golden thing. What's up? You need to come down?
You're good.
Okay. So Steven's grabbing some boxes here. Let me collect my thoughts. That's a joke. All right, so what do you get here? It's a light Saison base. It's has certainly a very kind of apricot-y nose to it. It has, you know, maybe like a just ripe, slightly underripe, just kind of picked off the farm, so it still kind of has that kind of outdoorsy, a little green, but a lot of kind of like hay and like dry, dusty earth to it as well. You can almost like just like smell like the apricot skin. Wow. Definitely fruit forward. A lot of sour apricot, very lactic, almost like a lemony citric acid profile to it. I mean, certainly some barnyard. I mean, I'm trying to pick out, you know, like red wine or something like that, and I just simply can't. You know, you can tell that there's probably some oak going on there, but it's certainly not predominant. I'm gonna try something else again. Really what you're getting is just a sour apricot flavor here. Very bubbly, very effervescent, and very sour as well. In fact, some of the subtlety of the nose, kind of that like apricot skin and the dustiness is a bit kind of blown out by just how sour this beer is. So smelling it is one thing and tasting it kind of becomes another thing. Both are very pleasant, but certainly a beer that I would probably want to share this bottle with, just because of the amount of acid, or at least have it with some food, you know, or some cheese, something kind of rich and fatty to kind of balance this acidity against. In fact, yeah, some nice kind of washed rind cheeses or like a triple cream or something like that would go really well. In general, some of these really sour beers are hard to pair with food. I found cheeses and funky cheeses to be my personal favorite because they balance out that acid and also complement some of that funky barnyardy flavor, especially if you get like a goat or sheep cheese or something like that. Okay. Very nice beer. I'm like just like salivating from all that acid. Yeah, really, really solid stuff. I've had this in the past and I thought I remembered it being... No, that's not true. It was very sour then too. I was going to say I remember it being more of like a sweet fruit thing, but that's not true. I was wrong. My memory was wrong. Okay, the next one is Farmhouse Noir. This is a dark Saison from Sante Adairius. Now this one is 100%. This particular version, I think they've had a couple versions they put out in the past. This particular one is a 100% barrel fermented saison. As you can see, it's quite dark. Fermented entirely in oak. Has some oats in it as well. Those oats are going to add a lot of kind of long chain proteins. They're going to add mouthfeel, and also give something, depending on how long it kind of sits in the barrel or sits on some of these wild yeasts, something for those Brettanomyces to munch on as well and make some kind of funkier flavors. Very dark beer. I mean, holding it up to the light here, you know, you can see through it. It's a clear beer, but it's a very dark chestnut brown, if not really kind of black at the center of things. A lot of kind of like, whoa, just gonna like spill beer all over myself. A lot of like dark currant, dark like grapey notes to it. Some kind of like dusty cocoa powder. And yeah, like this one almost has like a red wine, vinous, big Cabernet kind of nose to it as well. Underlying, but really nice. Certainly a little bit of that kind of apricot-y sourness as well. You can't smell sourness, but you know, some of those aromas that you associate with sour, at least that I do in these beers. Really fun. A hint of licorice or fennel maybe. Yeah, and just some nice kind of cocoa powder. You can definitely get the oats because it's like a bigger, fuller, slicker mouthfeel. It's a very nice balance of sweet and sour. There is quite a bit of acidity here, but there's also a lot more sugars, or at least perceived sugars here. So whether this is a bone-dry beer or not, the way I'm perceiving it is to have a little bit of kind of sweet and sour. It could certainly be from just kind of some of those chocolate flavors and lack of bitterness. You know, non-bitter chocolate maybe makes me think sweet, whether it is or not, but I'm certainly... Yeah, I really like it. This is a very well done, dark, sour beer. Not kind of as sour and in your face as Sour in the Rye, a little bit more restrained, a little bit more nuanced and subtle than that beer. Very solid, very solid. I really like how some of these breweries are taking some of these darker malts and kind of playing with them and seeing what they can do. Really, really nice beers. Very well made beers. These are two beers that I would really, that are a treat. And to paraphrase Ferris Bueller, as I do from time to time, if you have the means, I highly recommend you picking them up. They are quite choice beers. So there you have it, a couple beers from Sante Adairius, Sarah, the West Ashley, and the Farmhouse Noir, two excellent examples of kind of what's going on with these mixed fermentation, wild fermentation, American wild ales right now. Very, very nice, kind of clean, funky beers. Very, very good examples of it. So there you have it, guys. Thanks as always. If you have any comments, you can leave them at craftbeertemple.com. You can also just shoot me an email. Thanks for everyone who's recently rated or reviewed our show on iTunes. That definitely helps get the word out. So if you do want to do something for the show, I don't have a donation button or anything like that, but if you want to help out, write a review. It does help kind of get it out there, and it helps us kind of with our visibility on the iTunes shop. But other than that, thanks as always, guys. I've got to go up and taste out some beers that I think people are going to be pretty happy to see sitting up there on the counter. But until next time, I've got some great American wild ales to drink, and hopefully you do too. Mind me. Cheers.